There's not a very simple way to programmatically edit a CSV file, meaning I can't open a CSV file and say row 7, column 3, change this. It just doesn't work that well because it's called comma separated values. It's not really a full powered database. Now in databases you can do that, but CSV files you can do it, it's just a little bit more challenging. The other side of the challenge is, if you remember back to when we were working with that W plus stuff, it actually we can get to a point where we actually overwrite the original data, and that is actually kind of troubling. That actually causes some issues for us. So instead of overwriting our initial data, what we're going to be doing is creating a temporary file and then copying our data into that temporary file, all of the data, editing where we need to edit, and then come back and bring that copied temporary file into that new data file. So if there's any issues with the writing side of it, then it will fail and the temporary file will not actually override that original file. So basically, I'm going to take the original file, copy it, or copy the data in it, and then write that data to a temporary file. Once the temporary file is done, then we're going to bring that temporary file back to the original file and overwrite everything there. So to do this, we're going to use a few built-in libraries from Python. And the first one is shutil, or shutil, and then from temp file, import named temporary file. Those are the two things that we're going to be using. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to first off make just a with. We're just going to copy and paste some stuff here a little bit, just like what we did with our WCSV. But I'm going to put it inside of Hungry Data because we're going to write this out and then we're going to put it into a actual method. So, of course, the file name itself is, we'll just say file name equals to data.csv. We've seen that already. And then we're also going to say temp file. Temp file equals to named temporary file. We're calling that class that we imported. And we'll say delete equals to false. So it's not going to delete it right off the bat. And now we'll do with open. And it's going to be file name. And then RB. So we're using the binary here versus just standard R. And then we'll do as CSV file and temp file. So the file name is going to be the same for both of these things. And the first thing we'll do is reader equals to CSV dot dict reader. And this is the CSV file. So this should read that CSV file. And then we want to add the file names again. So file name equals to, and again, we'll do ID. This time I want to do, it's going to be ID, name, and email. I'm going to add one more thing. So ID, name, email, and sent. Actually, let's add two more things and we'll do amount and sent to go back to what we had prior. So these should be all the fields that we had before. So now what we'll also do is create a writer, and we'll put this equal to CSV file, or excuse me, CSV dot dict writer, like we've seen before. This time I'm going to use the temp file, not the CSV file, but the temporary file. And I'm going to add in my field names. Field names equals to field names. And so we have one that's the reader and one that's the writer. So the reader is reading the original, the writer is writing on the temporary file, kind of as you might expect. Now, just like we did originally, or would want originally, we're going to want to write the header. So we'll do writer.write header. And now we'll do for row in reader. So for each row in the reader, we can now actually put this stuff into our writer. So I'm just going to do writer.writeRow and parentheses, curly brackets, coming in here, ID being row ID. I'll explain why we can do it this way in just a second. And then I'm going to come through and do name being the same. And then finally email. Row and email. Last two things are going to be amount is going to be, let's just give some arbitrary string number here. Doesn't really matter there. And I'll say sent. I'll give sent an empty value. Okay. So where and why can we use this? Well, dict reader, if you remember, it comes back as a dictionary value. So each row is a dictionary value itself. We can see that by printing out this row. So since it's a dictionary value, we can expect that we'll have some of these fields. We don't have all of these fields, mainly because we didn't have amount and sent before. So amount and sent are not here, only ID, name, and email. So we're copying that stuff and putting it in here. Now, once you're finished with it, these are the things that we might want to change on each row or any given row, which is something we'll talk about in just a moment. Okay, so this should actually handle everything for us. And then finally, we'll use shutil.move, and this is going to be temp underscore file dot name to file name. So this should actually move it to where we want it to go or where it needs to go. All right, so I'm going to leave this off for just a second, and I'm going to go ahead and do some imports here. Well, actually, we don't have to do any imports. We can just call hungry data, and that's what we'll do. So calling hungry data will append some data, which we don't need any longer. So I'm gonna take off that appended data. We will have to update that function in a moment, but right now I took off that appended data, and we have all of this other stuff. So this looks good. Let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. And we'll pick up the rest in the next one.